Research and Learning by Kelly Cannon for Walden University, EDUC 6617J. The first part of the learning process I will discuss are the learner-centered principles. Created by the American Psychological Association, there are 14 principles that could be used as guidelines by any educator. From the 14 principles, Dr. Patricia Alexander and Karen Murphy narrowed them down to 6 areas of understanding. The 6 areas are knowledge base, strategic processing, learner motivation, development and individual differences, situation and context, and student assessment. When an educator implements all 6 areas of understanding, all students have the chance to succeed. In the past, it was popular for the teacher to not be seen as a leader, but one who did what she was told when it came to education. She was given a lesson she was expected to teach, or a concept that she needed to create a lesson for. One could argue that this practice is still happening in many educational systems today. However, an effective classroom occurs when the teacher and students create lessons together with the needs of every student's learning process in mind. The 4 C's are the basis for 21st century learning. Critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity provide students with a growth mindset to continue their learning beyond the classroom. It encourages students to experience their learning and to continue to think outside the box. It is most likely that all educators today have heard of Bloom's taxonomy. It was the basis of all of my college education courses. Remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. The taxonomy approach in education provides teachers with an insight into learning outcomes and curricula and assessment of students. Lev Vygotsky's zone of proximal development contains 4 aspects: the pedagogical importance of the learner's individual experience. Ultimately, the child teaches himself. The pedagogical applications of interest, from one interest of the child's to a new interest. The psychological value of play. Games are the child's first school of thought. And the link between life and education. Ultimately, only life educates. Pavlov's dog's experiment is based on associative memory. In his experiment, the dogs associated food with the ringing of a bell. He proposed this learning process could take place on a broader scale with students' learning processes by focusing on memorization. There is an endless supply of theories on how learning occurs. I have chosen 5 to focus on. The first is the learning style theory. This theory focuses on the fact that children learn in many different ways. The key is to reach each child with whatever style of learning they learn best. The 4 main types of learners are concrete and abstract perceivers and active and reflective processors. Teachers can reach all 4 learning styles by using a variety in their curriculum and instruction, such as experience, reflection, and imagination. Brain and mind learning refers to a natural learning process that happens to all humans through their life experiences. Social learning theory is what happens when a desired behavior is observed through modeling. The multiple intelligences theory focuses on each student's strengths. Similar to the learning style theory, the multiple intelligence theory recognizes that all students learn in different ways. There are 9 multiple intelligences that have been identified: verbal linguistic, logical mathematical, visual spatial, body kinesthetic, musical rhythmic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalistic, and existential. Teachers who use a variety of teaching strategies can reach each student and help them develop their strengths. There are 2 types of behaviorism: classic and operant. Operant is when a child learns that he will receive a reward after performing the desired behavior. Classic is a natural reflex to something. The important aspect of both is feedback. Through feedback, the child learns to work towards the positive behavior. Brain-based learning is based on the fact that all students learn differently. Therefore, the strategies used to teach students must vary to meet all students' needs. The following 5 strategies are excellent approaches to make this possible. First, set a positive tone from the beginning. Setting a safe, positive environment for students can increase student engagement. Secondly, establish turn-to-talk time. Sometimes students understand concepts when they come from each other rather than the teacher. Thirdly, incorporate visual elements. Most students are visual learners. Therefore, any visual aids that are used can help reach students in a different way that is easier for them to connect with. Fourthly, break learning into chunks. Students can easily understand small chunks of information rather than being overwhelmed by too much information. Lastly, get moving. Physical activity in the form of brain breaks can increase brain activity and function. There are many individual and social factors related to increasing student learning. First, create a trusting environment. Second, build relationships with students and make your classroom a community. Thirdly, be aware of and empathetic to students' emotional needs, individual beliefs, and culture. Fourthly, give the student responsibility for their education. Lastly, facilitate as much as possible. It is more powerful by building strength in students. Today, teachers are being encouraged more and more to include instructional technology in the teaching and learning process. Some of these can be found in the form of blogs, wikis, podcasts, Google Slides, and websites. The list could go on and on. The use of instructional technology adds yet another layer in the learning process to help the teacher reach each individual student in their own learning process, allowing teachers to educate students to be successful in their lives and careers. The plan I have made for this module is an instructional plan for printmaking grade 2. The learning objectives for this plan are as follows. By the end of this lesson, students will be able to name at least 2 different artists from the pop art movement. And by the end of this lesson, students will be able to determine a good print from a bad print. The where to for this lesson is that students are learning the technique of printmaking to understand that printmaking is a method of reproducing their artwork so that it is easier to obtain. The best explanation for students to want to participate in printmaking is to demonstrate the process for them. Usually pulling a print from a matrix produces a significant awe factor that motivates students to create their own. Students will engage in the learning objectives through hands-on experiences with printmaking. I have also created a printmaking wiki site that students can use to self-direct through the learning about pop art printers and making their own printing matrix. I can ensure students are meeting the objectives through observing their printmaking process from start to finish. Students will pull at least 3 prints from their printmaking matrix. Once this is done, students will use a rubric to determine if any of their prints meet the requirements of a successful print. If not, students need to pull more prints from their matrix and repeat the process until they refine their prints. Students can also use a partner critique to determine if a peer thinks their print is as successful as it should be. I will know students understand when I observe their process of printing. When students pull their perfect print, they will learn how to correctly edition and display their print. Then they will receive peer feedback to understand whether or not any adjustments should be made. The lesson is adaptable for kindergarten to high school. Each student will use a rubric to understand their skill level to attempt different levels of printing. I will note that what is grade level appropriate and work with the student's individual needs to determine whether or not they should move up or down on the skill chart. The wiki I've developed walks the students through each steps of the printmaking, learning, and making process. If the student is not self-directing through the wiki, the teacher can use the wiki to guide the class as a whole. Rad structures are connected within the way the brain accepts information. By making learning experiences enjoyable for students, the brain will release hormones such as dopamine and signals that allow the amygdala to accept the information and store it in the hippocampus. There are several ways this lesson will add the extra opportunities to make the lesson more enjoyable and fun so that students' brain hold on to the information they receive. First is humor. I always use an element of humor when talking with my students, whether it is just being silly or joking around with my students. Second is music. I set the atmosphere of my classroom by playing kid-friendly popular music. Many times, students wiggle to the beat or sing the words to themselves. Third is motion. By completing the actual motion of printmaking, students learn the procedures involved in pulling a successful print. Facilitating student learning by using the mastery model is maximizing student learning opportunities by teaching in a variety of strategies. In this lesson, students can use a wiki to self-direct through the learning process. I will also offer a teacher demonstration to hook students and motivate them into wanting to learn the printmaking process. I will use humor to ease anxieties and make the process more engaging and fun for students. Students will work through the learning process by creating a print and completing the printmaking process, allowing them to remember the steps easily. Finally, students will receive peer and teacher feedback throughout the process, allowing them to revise along the way to achieve the level of success each student wants to achieve.